Who are you, Mac Miller? How does it feel to be a white rapper? I don't know if
Man, like, I'm so much more than that. I feel like I felt like I can play music.
This 21-year-old kid from Pittsburgh was so full of life, still sat down with a lawyer and wrote a will. Not because he was sick, but because somewhere inside him, he already knew something the rest of us refused to think about. 5 years later, he was dead on his bedroom floor at 26.
To a heavy media and police presence here outside of the Studio City home of rapper Mac Miller.
He left behind $11 million, a house in Studio City, a closet full of Rolexes, and a will nobody knew existed until it was too late.
But he lived a hell of a life in the 26 years he was with us.
Parents got the fortune, his 4 closest friends got the personal pieces. And the way both sides have been living since his death is so far removed from what anybody expected that it has the entire internet completely stuck. Before we can talk about how the money moved after Mac died, we have to talk about what he actually built, because the scale of what this kid from Pittsburgh accumulated by 26 still catches people completely off guard. In September of 2019, roughly a year after his death, TMZ published the full court appraisal of his estate. The headline number was $11.3 million. Most people saw that figure, felt something, and kept scrolling. But the breakdown underneath that number is where the story actually begins, and it tells you more about Mac Miller than any song or interview ever could. About $5 million sat in liquid accounts, checking, savings, money market, brokerage. $5 million in accessible cash sitting under the name of a kid who started recording rap songs in his parents' attic at 14 years old. That alone would represent generational security for most families in America. But the liquid cash was not even the most valuable thing Mac owned. His master recordings were appraised at $4,758,000. That is the raw ownership of every sound, every vocal take, every beat, every finished and unfinished track that Mac Miller ever committed to tape across his entire career. His music publishing and royalty streams came in at $1,520,000. His rights of publicity, meaning the legal ownership of his name, his face, his likeness in perpetuity, were valued at just over $154,000. He held interests in 2 companies, Mac Miller LLC and Remember Music LLC, worth a combined few $100,000. And then there was the physical inventory. And fam, this is where your picture of Mac Miller either confirms what you already believed or completely shifts. Multiple Rolex watches, not 1, not 2, multiple, with some valued individually at over $30,000 apiece. Gold chains, Cuban links, diamond bracelets and earrings, an entire jewelry collection spread across more than 20 individual pieces that would require a dedicated safe deposit box just to sleep at night knowing it existed. A $5,000 guitar, $20,000 in household furnishings across his Studio City home, $15,000 in electronics spread across televisions, laptops, iPads, and production equipment, and a 2009 BMW valued at approximately $6,000. That 2009 BMW is the entire story pivots, and most people scroll right past it.
A lot of the reason that I've had the success, the little bit of success and buzz that I've created for myself is because, like, there's nothing super flashy about anything.
Real talk, that 2009 BMW is the single most revealing line item in the entire $11 million probate filing. Mac Miller could have driven anything. By 2018, he had the liquid capital to buy a Lamborghini Urus without putting a dent in his savings. He had peers pulling up to sessions in custom Rolls Royces and blocked out G-Wagons and Ferraris that cost more than most people's houses. The car culture and hip-hop during that era was at its absolute peak, with artists competing to post the most expensive vehicle in their driveway as proof of their financial status. Mac kept a 9-year-old BMW worth less than the single one of his Rolex watches. That is not a financial decision. That is a character decision, and it cuts directly against every assumption people make when they hear the words rapper, 26 years old, and $11 million in the same sentence. Check it. That car tells you something the viral content about his estate completely misses. Mac Miller was not living the way people think a multimillionaire rapper lives, and the gap between the assumption and the reality is where this story gets genuinely interesting. Now let's talk about where Mac actually lived, because this is the detail that surprises people more than anything else once they get past the headlines. Mac's home was in Studio City, a neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley area of Los Angeles that sits between Universal City and Sherman Oaks. It is a well-established, comfortable, industry-adjacent neighborhood. Actors, producers, musicians, and entertainment professionals have lived there for decades. It is not Beverly Hills. It is not Bel Air. It is not the Hollywood Hills with floor-to-ceiling glass and infinity pools overlooking the city. Studio City is the kind of neighborhood where you know your neighbors and the local coffee shop knows your order. Mac's house was a proper Los Angeles residence, comfortable and well-appointed, with enough space to host friends and enough privacy to work without the world watching. But it was not a mansion. It was not gated behind marble columns with a circular driveway and a security team. It was the kind of place where you cook food at 3 in the morning while an album takes shape in the next room, where the couch has been sat on by every person who matters to you, where the recording setup bleeds into the living space because the music and the life were never separate things for Mac. The household furnishings that were eventually left to his friend Jimmy Merton and appraised for $20,000 tell you the same story. $20,000 for an entire home's worth of furniture in Los Angeles is not luxury. That is a lived-in space. That is a home where the value was in what happened inside it, not in what it looked like from the outside. No interior designer curated those rooms for a magazine spread. No brand partnership furnished that living room in exchange for an Instagram post. Mac lived in his house the way most people live in their houses, except most people do not have $5 million in liquid cash sitting in accounts while they do it. The restraint is the point. The restraint is what makes the whole inventory read differently once you understand who this person actually was.
When the estate breakdown became public and people saw that Mac had left over 20 pieces of jewelry to his friend Q Chandler Cuff, the reaction was immediate and predictable. Thumbnails popped up across YouTube and TikTok showing Rolex watches, gold chains, and diamond pieces next to dollar signs and dramatic headlines about friends receiving luxury items while the family controlled the real money. The framing positioned it as if Q had been handed some kind of consolation prize, an expensive one, but still secondary to the millions that went to Mark and Karen McCormick. But that framing gets the entire story backwards, and it gets it backwards because most people do not understand what jewelry means inside hip-hop culture. Those pieces are not accessories, they are documentation. Every chain marks a milestone, every watch marks a moment. A Rolex purchased after a platinum certification carries the weight of that achievement in a way that a bank statement never could. A Cuban link bought on tour in a city where something unforgettable happened holds that memory physically. Mac's jewelry collection was a tactile timeline of his entire career, and he did not leave it to Q because it was valuable. He left it to Q because Q was the only person who would know what every single piece meant. Q Chandler Cuff was not some peripheral associate. He was Mac's gay one. He was the person in the room during the sessions, on the bus during the tours, at the table during the conversations that never made it to any documentary. Mac chose Q to hold those objects 5 years before he died in a clear legal document signed at 21 years old. That is not a deathbed emotional decision. That is a calculated act of trust from someone who understood exactly what those items represented and exactly who deserved to carry them forward. And fam, the combined appraised value of that jewelry collection was tens of thousands of dollars. In the context of a 26-year-old rapper with $5 million in liquid cash and nearly $5 million in master recordings, tens of thousands in jewelry is not the fortune people make it out to be. The real fortune was always in the music. The jewelry was something else entirely. It was memory given physical form, and Mac gave it to the person who shared those memories. Now, this is where the story takes the turn that nobody in the comments section is prepared for, because when you hear that two parents inherited the bulk of an $11 million estate from their dead son, your brain immediately starts constructing a lifestyle to match that number. Mansion in a gated community, luxury vehicles in a 3-car garage, designer wardrobes, first-class travel. The kind of visible, performative wealth that tells the world something fundamental has changed about your financial position. None of that happened. Mark McCormick is an architect. Karen Myers is a photographer. They raised Mac and his brother Miller in Point Breeze, a well-established Pittsburgh neighborhood that is comfortable and stable, but not extravagant. Point Breeze is tree-lined streets and brick homes and families who have lived on the same block for decades. It is the kind of neighborhood where people know your name, your parents' names, and probably your grandparents' names. Mac himself described his upbringing as reasonably well off but not wealthy, saying he never went hungry but also never grew up surrounded by any kind of extreme privilege. His parents were creative, working, professional people who happened to raise a son whose talent generated generational wealth before he turned 25. After inheriting the bulk of that $11.3 million estate, there are no reports of luxury car purchases, no mansion acquisitions, no relocation to a gated community in a warmer city, no designer-heavy social media presence performing wealth for public consumption, no reality television deals, no tabloid coverage documenting spending sprees or lifestyle upgrades. Mark and Karen stayed in Pittsburgh. They stayed in the same neighborhood, they stayed private, they stayed focused on the one thing that mattered to them more than any dollar amount. And that one thing is the detail that separates this entire story from every other celebrity inheritance narrative the internet has ever produced. They became stewards of their son's legacy instead of consumers of his fortune. Real talk, this is where the financial picture gets genuinely wild in ways that no viral thumbnail can capture. The master recordings appraised at $4.7 million in 2019 were never a static pile of money sitting in a vault. They were a living, breathing revenue engine connected to one of the most emotionally resonant catalogs in modern hip-hop. Every single time someone streams Self-Care or Ladders or Blue World or Good News, money flows into that estate. Every time a Mac Miller track gets placed in a television show or a film or a commercial, a licensing fee generates income. Every time a producer samples a Mac Miller record and clears the rights, a payment arrives. That catalog has not stopped working for a single day since Mac died, and the streaming era means it almost certainly never will. In January of 2020, the family released Circles, an album Mac had been developing with producer John Bryan around the same sessions that produced Swimming. That release is not assembled from leftover scraps and pushed out for a quick payday. John Bryan completed the project according to the creative direction Mac had established before his death, treating every production decision as a question about what Mac would have wanted rather than what the market would reward. It debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. Critics praised it as one of the most carefully handled posthumous albums in modern music history, and it pumped entirely new revenue directly back into an estate that was already appreciating in value every single quarter. Then, in 2025, Balloonerism arrived, material largely from the Faces era that hardcore fans had been waiting to hear for years. Again, the family handled it with the kind of deliberate care that tells you they're thinking in decades, not in quarterly earnings cycles. They did not dump unfinished tracks onto streaming platforms for quick engagement numbers. They treated every release as a creative decision with permanent consequences, not just a financial opportunity with a shelf life. And this is what people need to understand about why the $11.3 million appraisal from 2019 was a floor, not a ceiling. Swimming earned a posthumous Grammy nomination for Best Rap Album. The cultural relevance of Mac's music has not declined since his death, it has expanded.
New listeners discover his catalog every single day through recommendation algorithms and curated playlists, and the organic sharing that happens when someone plays a song at a gathering and the entire room goes quiet, because the music connects somewhere deeper than entertainment. Every one of those discoveries generates streaming revenue that flows back to the estate, back to the trust, back to the same legal structure Mac created at 21 years old in a lawyer's office in Pittsburgh. The $11 million was a snapshot frozen in time. The actual value of what the family controls today is almost certainly multiples of that number, and it keeps growing with every new fan who finds Mac's music for the first time. The family also established the Mac Miller Fund, originally called the Circles Fund, which has directed resources toward youth arts programs and substance abuse support for young musicians through partnerships with MusiCares and local Pittsburgh community initiatives. They took the cultural weight of a dead 26-year-old and built an infrastructure of support around his name that funds exactly the kind of help that might have made a difference for someone like Mac if it had existed in the right form at the right time. And fam, that is a choice. That is a deliberate, calculated decision about what to do with inherited wealth that goes far beyond securing your own financial comfort. They could have invested quietly, lived off the royalty income in private, and let the conversation about Mac's legacy run itself on autopilot forever. Instead, they built programs, they formed partnerships, they directed real dollars toward real organizations doing work on the ground in Pittsburgh and beyond. They made the name mean something active rather than something preserved behind glass. They have also been aggressive about protecting Mac's intellectual property, pursuing trademark lawsuits against counterfeit sellers who attempt to monetize his name, his image, and his likeness without authorization. That is not glamorous work. That is years of legal filings and enforcement actions and court appearances and quiet, grinding vigilance to make sure that the legacy attached to those millions of dollars does not get diluted by strangers trying to monetize a name they never earned the right to use. That kind of protection does not generate views, it does not trend, it does not fit in a thumbnail, but it is the work that keeps a legacy intact across decades, and the McCormick family has done it consistently since 2018 without asking for credit or attention. This is where it gets interesting when they talk about what the personal bequests actually reveal, because this is the piece of the distribution that the clickbait content gets the most fundamentally wrong. Brian Johnson received all of Mac's clothing and electronics, every television, every laptop, every iPad, every piece of clothing Mac wore in his daily life. On paper, maybe $15,000 in total appraised value, but think about what it actually means to be the person another man trusts with his entire wardrobe. Think about opening a closet full of shirts and jackets and shoes that still carry the physical presence of someone who will never walk through the door again. Brian did not receive an inheritance in any financial sense. He received the most personal objects a human being owns, and he received them because Mac believed he would treat them with the weight they deserved. Dylan Rechtenwald, a childhood friend and musician, received all musical instruments and equipment, including a guitar valued at approximately $5,000. Instruments carry something that no appraiser can quantify. They hold the muscle memory of every chord and every melody and every late-night session where something happened between the player and the sound that will never be replicated. Mac trusted Dylan with the physical tools that helped shape his artistic identity, and he made that decision at 21 and never revisited it. Jimmy Merton received the household furnishings, valued at approximately $20,000. The couches, the tables, the lamps, the physical environment of the Studio City home where Mac lived and created and hosted every person who mattered to him. Those objects are the architecture of a life that ended too early, and Mac chose Jimmy to hold them. And then there's the name that doesn't appear anywhere in any document, Ariana Grande. They dated from August of 2016 to May of 2018. Mac's trust was written in November of 2013, years before their relationship began. She was never added, she was never named. That tells you less about how Mac felt about her and more about how he treated this document as permanent and final. He wrote it once at 21, he meant every word, and he never changed a single name because he never needed to. The people listed at 21 were the same people he trusted at 26. That kind of consistency is its own form of loyalty, documented in legal ink on paper that outlasted him.
Nobody challenged the will. Nobody filed a lawsuit. Nobody claimed the distribution was improper. That silence from everyone closest to Mac is the most powerful confirmation that this was exactly what he wanted. The headline.
That's all I really wanted to do. Like, me and my homie just kind of chilled in the attic, didn't go out anymore, didn't do like the regular high school shit.
The headlines framing this distribution as questionable are not the whole story. They are barely even the introduction. The videos showing luxury mansions and designer lifestyles next to Mac Miller's name are performing a version of events that the documented record flatly contradicts. What the documented record actually shows is a family in Pittsburgh that inherited a fortune attached to the memory of their dead son and shows restraint over spectacle at every single turn. What the record shows is a catalog managed with creative integrity instead of commercial desperation. What the record shows is foundation work and trademark protection and careful posthumous releases and a private life that refuses to turn grief into content. The insane part of this story is not a lavish lifestyle funded by a dead rapper's royalties. The insane part is that two parents who could be living in any mansion in any city in the country are still in Pittsburgh, still private, still making every decision about their son's legacy with the kind of quiet discipline that earns zero viral attention but deserves all of it. The insane part is that a 21-year-old kid from Point Breeze sat down with a lawyer and got every single decision right, and the people he trusted have not wasted a single one of them. On September 7th, 2018, Mac Miller was found unresponsive in his Studio City home. He was in a kneeling position, almost like he was praying. He was 26 years old. The cause was accidental mixed drug toxicity from fentanyl, cocaine, and alcohol. Counterfeit oxycodone pills laced with fentanyl took him, the same quiet poison that his father would later stand on a public stage and warn every young person in that room about, with the kind of raw fury that only a parent burying a child can carry. Mac Miller did not die without a plan. He died with every detail accounted for, every person considered, every dollar directed, and the people he trusted have honored every word he put on paper. Drop your thoughts in the comments on how Mac's family has handled this legacy compared to other celebrity estates you have seen. We read every comment, and we will see you in the next one.